If you're watching this, that means you made it through the disaster that was 2020. And while there were plenty of setbacks this year and 9 months of delayed movies, that doesn't mean 2020 didn't give us some great films. So here are my picks for the 10 best films of 2020. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Let me know your picks for the 10 best movies of 2020. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours.
I have spoken.
For me, and I imagine a lot of you, this was a weird year to do a top 10 list. I'm a blockbuster franchise guy, and 6 months of blockbusters weren't released. Likewise, with the state of theaters, I didn't see nearly as many prestige films as I've seen over the last couple of years, and that means that this is a weird top 10 list. While I thoroughly enjoyed every movie that is on this list, if we're being honest, some of these movies probably placed higher than they otherwise would have been simply for lack of competition. Gotta state that first. And let's get started. Kicking off our top 10 is Inola Holmes. This is a delightful film about Sherlock Holmes' little sister. It's 1 part mystery and 1 part coming of age story, all told with this very energetic, dynamic style, and with a cast that elevates everything. The star is Millie Bobby Brown as Inola Holmes, and she just plays intelligent and naive so well. Then you have Henry Cavill himself as Sherlock Holmes, playing a very different version of this character and not being the lead, which was a nice spin for him. Then you have Sam Claflin as Mycroft Holmes, who's just the worst in this movie in the best way possible. Now, this movie might not seem like an obvious pick for me to put on a list like this, but this is one that my wife and I thoroughly enjoyed. And of all the movies in my top 20, this is the movie that we've actually rewatched the most. Number 9, Soul. This was the heartwarming, inspiring movie that we needed to close out the year 2020. It might not be an actual Christmas movie, but it touches on all the right themes and celebrates life in a way that it's just the right movie for this season, especially in this year. Also, the animation here is simply stunning. I was constantly wowed at their ability to create a world, whether the real world or the afterlife. It was stunning. Now, I don't find this movie to be the masterpiece that some people have declared it to be. I liked the real world segments a good bit more than the afterlife stuff that I don't think was as insightful as maybe it should have been. But still, this is a movie that does some amazing things and touches on some deep elements that you don't normally expect from an animated film. As mentioned before, this was the right movie at the right time, and it tugs on a whole lot of heartstrings. Next up, The Trial of the Chicago 7. This is the latest film written and directed by Aaron Sorkin, and it tackles the trial of the Chicago 7.
No way!
The film is based around the real-life trial from the late 60s surrounding civil unrest and police brutality, and considering that this movie has been in development for over 10 years, it's awfully timely. As always with Sorkin's work, it's jam-packed with lively characters and potent dialogue. Everyone is just so eloquent and articulate and say things in a way that sticks. Sometimes it's a little bit too much because Sorkin both wrote it and directed it, but he absolutely knows how to create these rousing and stirring moments. Number 7, Bad Boys for Life. This long-delayed sequel doesn't have any right to be as good as it is. When they dumped it in the month of January, I just assumed it was going to be bad.
I've got a bad feeling about this.
But then it turned out to be the best movie in the entire franchise.
You did it! Congratulations!
The movie's strength is that it leans into the passage of time and makes that the focus of the film. Mike and Marcus have lived 2 very different lives, and it's brought them to 2 very different places that's interesting for a pair of characters that we've been watching for 25 years. The new young generation in the film is used just the right amount, so they're a nice spice that livens certain sequences up. The humor surprisingly still lands, and the action is as dynamic as ever. And the bold twists they do in the second half of the film, every single one of them lands. This is a movie that I assumed was going to be an early dud, and it turned out to be one of the best action movies of the year. Then we have Palm Springs. This is a movie that wasn't on my radar whatsoever until after it released, and I started to hear some good buzz about it, checked it out, and absolutely loved it. On paper, it's a familiar time loop formula, but the execution makes all the difference. It changes just enough details about what we normally see in films like this to feel familiar while being wholly fresh. What the movie does so well is slowly reveal to the audience what's really going on with each of these characters. While the day might keep repeating, their character arcs and journey keep moving forward, and they keep revealing little pieces of information that cause us to reevaluate the day that we've seen so many times before. And of course, the whole thing is elevated by the chemistry of the two leads. It works as a comedy, it works as a romance, the character arcs work, and I really enjoy time loop movies, so this is a solid film and was a great surprise. In fifth place, The Gentleman. Guy Ritchie returns to the British criminal underworld genre that put him on the map, and it turns out to be one of his best films yet. It has all the memorable characters, snappy dialogue, and narrative complexity that put him on the map with Snatch and Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. But it also feels like a more mature film from an established filmmaker in a different phase of life. With these movies, the characters and cast are all great, but Matthew McConaughey, Hugh Grant, and Colin Farrell were the big standouts in this particular movie. It's funny. It's outrageous. Honestly, after nearly 2 decades of disappointments and safe franchise films, I didn't think that Guy Ritchie still had a movie like this in him, and I am so glad I was wrong. In fourth place is Extraction. I love action movies, and to me, this was the best action movie of the year. Joe Russo of the Russo brothers wrote the script. It's a straightforward plot, but it's effective and efficient, and of course, Chris Hemsworth is convincing and great in roles like this. But here he gets to show his dramatic side as the movie doesn't rely on his comedic chops. Along the way, he forms this bond with this child, and it creates a bunch of setups for some great heroic moments.
Because that's what heroes do.
And of course, as an action movie, the action is great. It was made by first-time director Sam Hargrave, who's been working in Hollywood in the world of stunts for a long time, being the stunt double for Chris Evans in Captain America: The Winter Soldier. He was the stunt coordinator for Avengers Endgame. He was the second unit director for the second season of The Mandalorian. And he took everything that he learned all throughout those years and delivered some phenomenal action. It's all shot with wide angles. The choreography is visceral, and it uses long takes so you can see everything that happens, including one sequence that's a 12-minute long chase fight scene that's a one-shot where Hargrave filmed part of it by sitting on the hood of a car himself. Oh yeah, and I got to interview him back in May. That was pretty cool. Anyway, this movie delivered everything that I want from an action movie. Real quick before I give you my top 3, if you've enjoyed this video, I have 3 different companion videos over on Patreon. The first one is 10 more of my favorite films of 2020. The second is my list of most disappointing movies of 2020. And the third are the 10 most surprising movies of 2020 to me. If you enjoy my content and want more like it, consider joining over on Patreon. For just $21, you can get all of the exclusives for 2021. If you're interested, The link is down below in the description, and let's get back to it. In third place is The Way Back. If you're familiar with my channel, you're probably aware that one of my absolute favorite movies of the last decade was Warrior, an MMA sports drama from Gavin O'Connor. And if you're familiar with my story, you know that I had some severe struggles with alcoholism prior to starting this YouTube channel. And in fact, I was in recovery and rehab when I started Sean Chandler Talks About. So when they announced that Gavin O'Connor was making a sports drama starring Ben Affleck as an alcoholic trying to put his life back together, it immediately became one of my most anticipated films of 2020. This is possibly the best Ben Affleck has ever been, and its exploration of alcoholism and the tragedies that fuel our destructive behavior hit really close to home for me. And for obvious reasons, this was the most emotionally resonant film that I saw this year. Now, the specific plot line about the high school basketball team follows a few too many of the genre cliches for this movie to reach the heights that Warrior did, but still another solid sports drama from Gavin O'Connor. Our runner-up, The Invisible Man. This movie was one of my most anticipated films of the year, based almost entirely on writer-director Leigh Whannell. A couple years back, he did a small-budget film called Upgrade that I absolutely loved. I thought it was clever and masterfully crafted, and Whannell brings that same bag of tricks to this movie. What Whannell does so well here is craft a narrative that's this great allegory for gaslighting. The story always comes first, but he has something to say through that story, and the moment and the message feel earned. And considering the film's low budget, every shot looks incredible. They're framed in a way to focus your eyes on the main details you're supposed to notice, but they use empty space so well in light of the title character and the types of thrills that the movie's going for. Along those same lines, it uses sound really nicely to build the tension and set the atmosphere. And what makes the movie so convincing is the use of practical effects instead of excessive CGI. When people are dragged around or thrown, you feel it. It uses a bunch of old-time tricks so you know you're seeing a real thing, not something built in a computer. From beginning to end, this was a solid thriller. But coming in at number 1 is Love and Monsters. This movie was absolutely not on my radar. I didn't watch the trailer for it. I didn't know anything about it. And after it came out, several of you messaged me suggesting I check it out. So one random night, my wife and I watched it, and we both ended up absolutely loving this quirky film about love and monsters.
Okay, I see what you did there.
Superficially, it has several elements that seem similar to Zombieland, and as you go throughout the film, it sets up a number of the tropes of the genre, but as you approach the moment of payoff, it always finds a way to deliver the emotion and experience that you want without leaning in or relying on the cliches. It has all the humor, romance, and monster mayhem that the trailer promises, but really what makes the movie work is the lead character's journey. He's set up at the beginning as this useless coward, but he still chooses to go on a dangerous journey. We learn that he's a very broken person who's experienced an enormous amount of tragedy, but he chooses to be hopeful and optimistic. And the reason all of this works is because of the fantastic performance from Dylan O'Brien, who manages to nail every single layer of this complex character. And as crazy as this sounds, probably my favorite scene in any movie this year is in this film where the lead character sits down to talk to a robot. At the start of the scene, it's just the payoff of a joke that was set up earlier in the film, and then it transitions into this incredibly poignant and emotional sequence, largely because of Dylan O'Brien's phenomenal performance. And then it closes out with almost a celebration of how this broken world is still incredibly beautiful, all while progressing the plot forward. It's just remarkable how much plot emotion and humor was put in this short little sequence. Anyway, it's a shame that this movie was initially released as a $20 rental because I imagine that stopped a lot of people from watching it and talking about it. It's cheaper now. Go watch it. For me, this movie over-delivered on every single level from beginning to end. Therefore, it comes in at number 1. If you want to see my picks for the worst movies of the year, check out that list right over there. If you want to see the companion videos with the biggest disappointments, biggest surprises, and 10 more of my favorites, that link is down below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much in 2021.